this is Monsignor John Kasza from St. James Parish in Novi, Michigan, and we're continuing our self-help series. Today's topic is that of divorce. Now, for many people, they've heard that the church does not like divorce. They've heard that if you're divorced, you can't go to church. If you're divorced, you're somehow ostracized from the community. And I'd like to offer some clarifications on that. First of all, divorce is permitted in the church, especially in cases of abuse, especially in cases where there are irreconcilable differences. And sometimes when two people get together, they discover over time that they were simply not meant to be together. And many times it was because at the beginning of their courtship, at the beginning of their dating process, they ignored some of the telltale signs that this would not be a good relationship. The thing about divorce is that it's not one person's fault. Both parties are responsible for what happens in the marriage, or what doesn't happen in the marriage. Now, it could be true that one party may get involved with another person, or may end up doing something that destroys the marriage or weakens the bond. But ultimately, it's the two people that are involved that have to take responsibility for the success or the failure of the marriage. A couple of things about divorce is that if you find yourself in a situation where your marriage is breaking down, it's important to realize you need to really go out and get some help. Either talk to your priest or your deacon or your pastoral associate, talk to a counselor, but talk. The number one cause of breakups, whether it's marriages or relationships, is a lack of communication. But by the time you're talking the word divorce, the lines of communication have already broken down. But at that point, there still can be some things you can do to make sure that the divorce is somewhat amicable, that the divorce is somewhat peaceful. And so you should still communicate and look at ways to make sure that from that moment forward, you treat each other civilly, you treat each other with compassion, you recognize that you're just moving on in your lives. The second thing to focus on in a divorce is not to cast blame. The tendency is to say he said or she said. No, you both said and did things that were wrong. Now let's move on to the next step. The third thing is that once you've gone through the process of divorce and gone through all the legal and financial obligations and taking care of the children and so forth, is to really begin moving on, moving forward. And for many people that involves getting the annulment, especially if you think that in the future you may wish to get married again in the church. Also, the annulment process is a very healing process. People who have gone through it say it's cathartic. It releases some of their emotions and their feelings and allows them to get on with life. The next thing is to realize that the divorce, although it's a permanent legal action, you still have to sometimes interact with your former spouse, especially if there are children involved. And so when you do interact with that person, even though there may have been pain and suffering during the course of your marriage, you need to treat that person as your brother or your sister in Christ, and recognize that although mistakes were made, they still have to be treated with dignity and respect. A couple of theological things. First of all, if you do get a divorce, you still may come to church. You still may receive the sacraments, especially communion. You should, after having a divorce, go to confession. You should take the time to get involved with support groups, if there are any in your parish. Get involved with people, talk it out, continue to process the event. However, if you do decide to get married, and because you don't have an annulment, you get married outside the church, you may not receive communion. If you are divorced and remarried without an annulment, you may not receive communion. So the solution to that is to get an annulment. We can talk about that in another video. But the fact is that the marriage has to be, in order to receive communion, you have to really be free to do so. If you're in a marriage that has not been recognized by the church, you're not able to receive communion. But that's easily rectified. Simply talk to your priest, deacon, pastoral minister, and ask that person to help you and to talk about solutions for your particular case. Finally, the thing about divorce is it's very painful for a lot of people. Not only the spouses, their children, their family members. So if you know of someone that is going through a divorce, don't try to offer solutions. Simply offer a compassionate ear. Let them talk, let them speak, let them share their emotions, their feelings. And just say, I'm there to be a listening shoulder. I'm there to hear you. I will pray with you. I will cry with you. I'm not going to give you any advice because that's not my place. But I'm there to be with you and to walk the journey with you. And the final thing to realize is that God is with you. And take the time, especially if you're going through a troubled marriage, to pray, to ask God's support, to ask God's mercy and kindness, and to ask God to be with you as you make difficult decisions and try to move forward on with your life.